Sounds good. I'm happy to start too. Hi everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Now I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois. My name is Brandi Bridges. I am the class of 2007. I studied civil engineering and Hispanic studies, which is now I think called Spanish language at Rice. I was a member of the Brown College, and I now am working. I worked in the consulting field for about 6 years at McKinsey and Company, based out of Chicago, but also did a stint in Chile. And now I'm working in the tech sector with a nonprofit that is working to turbocharge the tech ecosystem in Chicago.
Terrific. I'll go next. My name is Jeff Mischka, and I graduated in '84. I was a member of Will Rice College. I went to high school in New Jersey, moved to Texas for college, worked my way through over at the medical center. I had a string of different jobs, which were very convenient for me. And I was a managerial studies and economics major. I found my way to that after entering Rice as a chemistry major. And I realized very quickly that there were a lot more smart people in my class than myself. So I moved to a place where I found a home, and that was managerial studies and economics, and it set me up well for a career in consulting.
I can go next quickly. So Tawfik Jarjour, I am class of 2012. I was one of the founding members at McMurtry. I'm an associate there now. I've been fairly involved with Rice since I graduated. I was not planning on going into consulting. I was planning on going into medicine, and everything I studied as an undergrad was biology or cognitive sciences or neuroscience or whatever was healthcare related, preparing me to be a doctor. And I thought I would take a 1-year stint in consulting to learn about business, and I'm still there. So my career at Accenture has taken me through healthcare. I've done work in high tech and in a lot of the technology spaces. I'm working with retail clients, but overall my focus is growth strategy, market entry, and M&A for companies. And that's taken me around the world. This past year and a half has been really weird for me because really since I joined Accenture, I'd been on the road every week up until last year. And then this past year has been working from home. So it's been very interesting. I've got to know this room extremely well. And I'm happy to share more about some of these stories as part of the process, but I'm in consulting now and presented at a bunch of these events this week. So happy to share more stories.
Hi, my name is Christina Han. I graduated in 2017. I was a political science and history double major, and I was also from Brown College. So it's great to meet the rest of the panelists. So currently I am rounding up on my 4th year as a management consultant at Credera, which is a boutique yet global consulting firm. And I have been very grateful to my company because they've allowed me to go ahead and start my master's full time. So right now I'm also pursuing a master's degree in design and innovation at SMU while doing consulting part-time. So it's great to be financially stable while also doing higher level education. Yeah, for me, my path, similar to Tawfik, I was honestly thinking law school with a poli-sci history. And then after getting involved with Design for America and being a team lead for several nonprofit style consulting projects, I realized that I was a little bit too impatient in my path to help people to do more school before I could get to that. So consulting was a natural fit for me.
All right, so now just going back to the first question here. For everyone on the panel, how did you move from the learning phase as a consultant to being seen as a leader on your teams before being given an official leadership role? And how long did this transition take for you? And what did it take to get to that point?
I can take that first. So as probably the most junior person to the workforce on this panel, in consulting, the beauty of it is that you are expected to be an expert quickly. So even if you are new to something, there are several steps that you take of due diligence where you research, you ask other people, you get those best practices, and you are just expected to be that leader in that client context. In terms of the company as a whole, I think it depends on the company, but for Credera, we are smaller. So whoever raises their hand first, they're in charge of that. And it is up to them to be the best at what they've committed to do. So it's definitely less about the official title and more about your own initiative and raising your hand and saying yes, and shaping that narrative in that way.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
I have a slightly different take. I think it takes 2 years, Christina. I'm just kidding. I think one of the things that is similar to your work at Rice, but you'll find very relevant to the working as a consultant, is that you're going to succeed as teams. So there are leaders, and everybody's a leader in a different way, but everyone succeeds as a team. And I think one of the ways that I sort of made that transition myself was to practice humility, to try to make sure that I focused on my colleagues' success, not understand the expectations on my work and what I was doing and the level of quality and the constraints and tools that I had at my disposal, but then make sure that my teammates are successful. And once I'm confident that the team is successful, then I could start to try to figure out how to take things off of my supervisor's plate. So how can I leverage him more so that he or she can do other things? And I think that sort of inside out approach to making yourself, then your team, and then your superiors successful is a great way to make that transition into a leader.
Yeah, and without going into too much, I think you stole some of my thunder, Jeff. So I will say it's fascinating how whenever you first join consulting, you're in a rush to take leadership roles and leadership positions. And then as you go through several years, you realize what you're just sharing, Jeffrey, which is it's key that you actually start giving away the leadership roles to others because you don't need them. And in a way, like I can't tell you how many times over the course of a week, someone gives me something like, hey, can you lead this? Can you run this? And it's actually one of the last things you want to do. So you want to find people and cultivate new leaders and new folks to take those positions, because if you try to do it all yourself, you're not going to be able to move ahead in consulting. And it's actually fascinating. There's an inflection point. The first few years you're trying to do as much. And then after you get to a certain point, you start switching into, I don't want to lead as many. I want to be able to help coach and advise others who are leading. So I'm sure Brandi has some thoughts on that too.
I was just going to say, I'll add just maybe one more point, because I liked everything that the other panelists have said so far, especially around the team aspect. I found that to be a really critical part of my experience in consulting also. The two things I'll mention around the shift to leadership versus being an individual contributor. I think, again, given in the individual contributor role that you're performing and that you're meeting the needs of your team and delivering on the work that you're responsible for. I think given that that's happening, one great way to think about being a leader is taking on things that might not be the most attractive thing to do on behalf of the team. And so it might be, taking on a work stream that's maybe been sidelined, but still important to the final answer of the team's delivering something to the client. Or it could mean even something like, being responsible for the team's health and sort of mental wellness so that everyone can achieve more. I know I've had people on my team that have been really great about planning team events or making sure that we're all meeting sort of our development milestones, and just being responsible for that, which anyone can do. But having some aspect that you've carved out and that you remind and help the team be responsible to delivering on, I think is really important.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. And now I guess we're going to kind of shift gears and talk more about your Rice experience. So what do you feel like was the most important thing that you learned at Rice, and would you have done anything differently?
It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question.
I'm just trying to think of because if you think broadly, right? If you think of everything you've learned, let me narrow down my scope of answer, if that's all right, and then I'll think maybe some other panels will do the same. I'd say if you think through that question, in terms of consulting and what was it that I learned at Rice that helped me succeed the most as a consultant, it actually wasn't necessarily what I learned in class. It wasn't necessarily what I learned from a certain subject or book or anything like that. It was more the interactions I had with the students I was with at Rice. And in part, I was very involved in volunteering, but I think the piece that stuck out the most to me looking back at my Rice experience, sometime around my sophomore year, I made a decision to sit at a new table every single day for one of my meals, whether it was lunch or dinner, to interact with new students on campus, like go and see something different. I remember there was a lot of times I'd like to go over to Hanson because that's where people on the football team and other places were, and just get to meet people who you don't interact with on your day-to-day basis in class or in your like in your major, in your college. And that experience actually, I think, helped me the most with consulting because it got me comfortable with reaching out to new people, having those conversations, having those kind of discussions. So it's a small thing if you think about it back in comparison. And I know it's hard now with COVID, but being able to have that comfort of reaching out to somebody new was important.
I can mention one thing that was that I appreciated and learned at Rice, which helped in consulting. So I mentioned I was as an engineering major, and frequently was at lab and working on problem sets quite late in the evening, and so it was there was a little bit of mental fortitude required in order to solve a problem, which didn't necessarily have one direct answer, but I think grappling with challenging problems and not getting flustered and trying to think about, if I came to a dead end on one approach, trying a new approach, or thinking about other resources to leverage, be it classmates or the TA, but sort of just being able to think critically and get deep in a problem in order to find a solution, I think was one thing I learned that at Rice. Well, that was helpful in my career later on, not just in consulting.
I would agree. I don't think there's anything specific around a book or a topic or a subject. I think for me, it was kind of being able to appreciate the diversity of thought that people had, and being able to, have the confidence to welcome new ideas, and then the courage to pivot and realize, as Brandi was saying, there may be a right answer, but there may be 6 different right answers. Mm-hmm. And depending on the context and, your capabilities and, which way the wind is blowing, any of those answers could be the best answer. And it's having the continued intellectual curiosity to continue to question it and optimize it and come up with the best solution. And as consultants, that's what we need to do for our clients. It's often not executing what they think they need, but it's helping them broaden their thinking outside the box with different perspectives to come up with a solution that they didn't even think was possible.
And then piggybacking off of what Jeffrey said, I think that diversity of thought element, where being able to think of things in different contexts and applying different inputs to different contexts I feel that is really a Rice advantage, just because we have such a variety of friends. Like, we have our engineers, we have our social scientists, we have our humanities people. We also have people who do all of that. And all of us think about something in a different way. And oftentimes, maybe with this certain type of problem, that different way of thinking is what solves it. So that's something I gained a great appreciation for in terms of the Rice breakfasts at Rice, any mealtime at Rice. You never know what's going to happen, but so absolutely love that. And then another thing that I learned from my time at Rice was being able to understand myself and how I work. So this is actually kind of going to Brandi's point in terms of, do you know how you are able to get yourself to work despite having multiple things to do? If you are feeling that you are hitting a wall, are you able to recognize that, stop, and understand what are the other elements, environmental elements at play as well? So I think I learned how I responded to stress whether it be professional, academic, and or social, and how that might impact the quality of my work and my ability to think. So that is something that I think Rice prepared me well for. I knew how I responded to stress.
Nice. So now kind of shifting, and I have to agree, Christina, every meal here at Rice is like, it's a new experience. So now kind of shifting more into a question related to kind of shifting gears into like careers into consulting. So if you're a young professional 2 to 5 years into your career, how do you best position yourself for a pivot into a career in consulting?
I want to let our more senior resources respond first
Tawfik,
before I jump in.
You look like you had something on your tip of your tongue. Go ahead.
Oh, me or?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the reason I probably do, I've had just the same conversation. I had this conversation maybe 6 times this week. So there's people who get in touch like all the time and they're asking, how do I get into consulting and what do I do? And I tried this out for a few years and I shifted, right? I want to do consulting. I went into engineering. I went into medicine. It could be a variety of fields. So the biggest thing I encourage these folks to do is there's a few paths. So one, there's a standard path, which is if you haven't done an MBA yet, go ahead and get an MBA and then use that to get into consulting. It's usually a good leg up and gives you the experience and background you need. But there's other ways too, in addition to that, or in lieu of it, and that is really connecting with the right communities, getting involved. There's actually a lot of growth opportunities. There's communities out there, there's clubs, there's certificates, there's places where you connect with consultants. I think having those connection points, there's actually a Rice alum who reached out to me and they used to just reach out to as many alumni. They look up Rice and consulting and they'd find all these people on LinkedIn that matched up that description. And, you know, even if only 5 of them responded back, at least they got those 5. So if you are active enough and you're doing that kind of a search, you will find people. That's how these people, I mean, I told you 6 people in the last week reached out to me on that kind of topic because they have those questions and they have that desire. And those 6 people are going to be the ones who end up in consulting from other fields. And that's what it comes down to. Because it's the hunger to want to learn, to want to grow, to want to do something different. I'm sure, especially Brandi and Jeffrey, you've seen that with people that you probably hired over the years, but it's all about how much do you want it? And then if you want the standard easier route to do it. If you do an MBA, it makes it easier to go through the recruiting process and everything, but you don't have to, but it's a good way of doing it.
Shout out to the Rice MBA.
Yeah.
So adding to that, I think once again, it really depends on what you're doing. So, and also where you're applying. If you are already in technology, sometimes it is, and then you're coming from a bigger brand name, it is easier to be able to switch into consulting, especially the technology consulting realm, because you have that. And also there's a difference between campus hire recruiting versus experienced hire recruiting. So with campus hires, you're more likely to have people that actually look at your resume a little bit more and then give you a chance because you don't have that experience. When it comes to experienced hires, oftentimes when you submit your application, we usually have a recruiting software like Greenhouse, and the algorithm does the calculation ahead of time. And oftentimes, if you don't fit that criteria, just knocks you out. And so I'm saying this because, speaking to Tawfik's point, your connections are really important. Even having that referral will give you a leg up. Having those coffee chats ahead of time will be able to, then people will actually be tracking your resume, because I've had friends who have just applied without telling me, and the algorithm just kicks them out, even though I know that they are really good at the work they do and they would be a good fit. It's just one thing was off somewhere. And so it's always good to have a human set of eyes vouching for you.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important lessons I've learned over my career, and I guess I would paint myself as one of the more senior people, Christina. Having done this for over 30 years, I worked at Anderson Consulting, which became Accenture, then Deloitte, then IBM, a couple of other small stops in the middle, but big name companies. If you don't have a personal contact and a connection as part of your network, then it's really difficult to get noticed, particularly if you're coming from an external field. Now, there's lots of room for somebody with, 2 to 6 years or 10 years of experience, in a particular company to join consulting and to take that experience and leverage it for other clients' benefit and to further evolve the thinking of the consulting firm that you join. But having that network connection is critical. And I would just encourage everybody to, do what you can to keep it fresh. One thing I did one time by accident was when I moved from Los Angeles to New York at one point, I switched careers and I also switched my cell phone number. And I sent out a note to people saying, hey, I've got a new cell phone number. And all of a sudden I had all these business development, leads coming to me. And my new employer is like, where did this come from? I'm like, I don't know. I said, every 5 years, I'm going to change my number. And, it was a great way to just kind of rekindle that network. People remembered me and they're like, hey, are you in New York again? Let me call you. I got a problem. Maybe you can help me. So that was by accident, but now I'm much more measured in terms of keeping in contact, particularly now when everybody's remote. It's actually been a great asset to have that network and be able to reach out and maintain it.
All right, so now a quick little.
I like that one.
A quick little follow-up here to what Tawfik and Brandi mentioned about your comments on an MBA. So, do you have any advice on capturing recruiters' attention as if you're like a non-MBA graduate student? So, like for example, if you're pursuing a master's of global affairs or something like that.
I can mention. So I think as it relates to consulting in general, I think I might just say something that's as a grounding statement. It's, I think it's really important to reflect on your reasoning and why you want to go into consulting. I think different people have different rationale. For me in particular, I wanted to see a breadth of different problems outside of the industry that I had started in, which was oil and gas. So I knew I really liked the operations of oil and gas, but I wanted to see how operations in a manufacturing field work, operations in a logistics company, and other types of more heavy industry, which was interesting for me at the time. And so for me, it was more of like opening the doors to different views. Others are really interested in teaching and mentoring and having a really strong relationship with their clients, whereby they can be a Sherpa and take them through different experiences that they've had and that they can coach them through. So I think it's just really important to reflect on the reasoning of why you individually might want to get into consulting. Given that, going back to your question, Rajpal, if you are coming from a graduate studies or some more focused type of academic area, I think you're extremely well positioned to be an expert on that topic. I know when I was at McKinsey, we had different profiles that we hired for. So might be, kind of the generalist coming out of an undergraduate program or even an MBA, or you might be more of a specialist with specific skill sets in chemistry or in public policy, and parlaying that into the types of problems that the clients at that particular consulting firm would be interested in solving. I think is it's a position of strength that you can communicate to a recruiter. So thinking about the specific skill set or the specific expertise or domain expertise that you can provide, I think is a really strong distinguishing element for someone coming from a graduate program.
Yeah, that's great advice, Brandi. And I think that actually ties with one of the things that Jeffrey was sharing. If we tag that with the network, what happens, this is what I tell a lot of people. Most of these experienced hires or people with a PhD or whatever other graduate degree that's not an MBA, most of them don't end up applying to the right part of a consulting firm. Mm-hmm. Like a company like an Accenture or McKinsey or any of these others, we have tens of thousands of open positions, and they end up applying to our more generalist program, and then they miss out because we might be hiring a PhD for a specialized program where they can actually use their experience. And that's where you need to really do some research about what options are there And then some companies might be better. I actually tell a lot of PhDs to apply to McKinsey because they have a great PhD program. So there's really, each company has unique opportunities based on your background. And then to Jeffrey's point, it's all about who you know, because if you talk to somebody, you talk to me, and I connect you with someone who knows semiconductors and you have a material science background, you can get a job like this. But if you never talk to me, you'd apply to some generalist program and you'd have trouble getting in, right? And so it's all about where you put your effort, because you can put your effort in the wrong places and then you'll get frustrated. And I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not getting interviews. And I'm sure a lot of you who are on the phone who have tried that, you may have dealt with some of those challenges yourself.
Yeah, I can't name how many PhD and grad students we've rejected because people didn't quickly understand, okay, what do you want to do? I mean, you sound very smart. Why aren't you going off and curing cancer? Why are you applying here? And also, what skills from that program translate over to the day-to-day of managing people and working with people in that way? So definitely being able to tailor what you have to fit the needs. If you are applying to a generalist position, being able to make your skill sets translatable, because from a research standpoint, there are so many things that translate well. The ability to dig deep and find information in places that you don't know where they exist, the ability to do critical thinking, the ability to hone in on a very cloudy problem. These are all really necessary and critical things, but how you sell yourself on a resume, one pager, 5 seconds of glancing, it needs to either be very strong or definitely look into the bigger companies with more specialized options for further education people.
All right, and now a question more for Jeffrey here. What do you think the future job market and demand of consulting looks like, or will look like?
I actually think it's evolving to in a couple of different ways. One, people want to understand. People want to buy a particular solution. They want somebody who's an expert in something. So I need somebody who's going to help me with my logistics. Somebody's going to help me manage my global supply chain. Someone's going to help me do that. So you kind of need to be known for something, but then you also need to be flexible enough to reinvent yourself. So I think that in the past, consulting was more of a generalist game. And now I think it's becoming more generalist with very specific point solutions. And I think that for a more seasoned person like myself, the value that I add is being able to look across silos. It's being able to assemble those pieces and then lead a team towards a common destination, which may not be all completely defined, but towards a common destination, and recognizing, how to enable that team to be successful. But I think that, having 6 smart people solve a problem without specific expertise that's relevant is a thing of the past. So I think it's going to be smaller projects, focusing on results in a very agile fashion, and that's what clients will be looking for. They also will continue to rely on consultants because it's a kind of a low risk move. If you've got the right value proposition as a consultant, it's very easy for a client to buy your services, much easier than it is for them to put a rec for a permanent employee and, where you're going to have a fixed cost for, years to come. It's easier to deal with the variable cost of a consulting workforce to solve specific problems.
Yeah, I want to add on this part. I've seen some drastic changes in consulting since I joined, and it's very much come down to when I started consulting, and I think every one of you can appreciate it. We used to do a lot of PowerPoints and a lot of Excel analysis and a lot of work that was delivering some recommendation to the end customer, and that's changed. And at least the company I'm working for now, like at Accenture, they've invested billions and billions of dollars in of all places, marketing and like computer design firms, marketing firms, people that make stuff. And so my deliverables these days look very different. So when a client asks, what can you do? Like if we have I'll give you an example we can share. Like, so we have a company like Subway asks us, how do you improve the customer experience? It's not just giving them a presentation to do that. We actually at the end submit a mobile app that you can all go and download from the App Store today and buy your sub and go and order a Subway sub. That's actually a project. And so it's a very different consulting experience than what it was when I joined. And I think it's going to continue to change like that, where they're looking for outcomes, and not just outcomes that you tell them, yeah, you'll get a better outcome, but actually something they can see in their hands. And having that real experience is very different. I'm sure all of you, all the others on the panel, have kind of seen some of that transition, because it's fascinating. It's one that I did not think I'd be getting into whenever I first joined this space.
All right, and then Brandi, I saw you answered a question in the chat from Jenny, and I was wondering if you wanted to expand on your answer just for everyone else.
Yeah, Jenny had a great question, and I also been curious to hear what the experiences of my colleagues here. But Jenny had a question around the sustainability of traveling and the hours, the work hours. So personally, so this will probably ebb and flow over the course of a career in consulting, but and especially now that we're in a pandemic or looking beyond the pandemic. So, but I'll talk about just briefly what my experience when I was in consulting. So I was on the road for 4 days a week. Typically, we left on Monday mornings and came back on Thursday evenings. I coming out of business school, was in my late 20s, and liked the perks of traveling. Actually, my husband, we were now married, but he was, we were dating at the time. We were both traveling. He was also a consultant at Deloitte. And so it would be times like we would like meet up at the airport and like drive home together or ride home together, or kind of cute, Christina, but like kind of like, but in any case, it was not as bad because we were at home together. And so, once he changed careers and I was still consulting, we had to really prioritize, the time that we spent together on the weekends when we were both home. And so, typically what that looked like for me was, sort of working from home on some Fridays, which was very, at the time it was the exception, right? And so many people were going into the office on Fridays so they could see their colleagues. And I love doing that too, but I needed to figure out a balance between, when I was away and prioritizing work then, and then prioritizing home when I could be home with him. I'll mention, so the traveling thing I think is can be challenging. You can, again, you might have a great experience with it. I think you also just need to think about how you make it sustainable for you, whether it's through, making sure you contact your family members every so often, getting workouts in, eating right. There's a lot of challenges, I think, with me on the road and having a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. But that said, there's also lots of great things happening, including some firms going away from, 3 nights away and doing more flexible travel. So again, I know McKinsey started doing that before I left. So one other thing I'll mention around work hours, that was actually probably the more challenging part for me was, because everybody was away, sometimes you were working into the night, and you were obviously working with colleagues, which was great, but it was also kind of hard to turn off. And maybe if you're all working together in the same team room, if you finished your work, but you've got 3 other colleagues that are working on something, it's sometimes hard to close your laptop and say, hey guys, I've finished my work, let me go home. So in any case, I'll mention that the work hours were challenging, travel was challenging, but then there was also times when I wasn't on a travel engagement, or I wasn't on a client engagement, even better. The work hours were super flexible and there was no travel. And so I could be home and I could get the doctor's appointments out of the way and kind of live life, that sort of thing. So everybody has a really different, there's probably the highest beta on travel and work hours. So I'll let some of the others on the panel talk about what their experiences were.
Well, I think one of the attractive aspects of consulting for me was the volatility. I didn't want to go to the same office every time. I didn't want to, have a routine job. Another good and bad thing about consulting is, if you're on a great project, it's too bad it's going to end. And if you're on a project that maybe isn't so great for you. Well, the good news is that's going to end too. So, it's a series of projects that make up a career in consulting, and you have to be kind of altruistic. You have to also be smart enough to know when to say no. You need to say, no, I can't do that on Thursday in Dallas. I can't. And if you'd be surprised, people accept that. It doesn't label you as someone who's not flexible or not willing to put in, whatever the extra effort is perceived to be. People respect that. So have the courage to do that. And another thing I'd say is, as you progress in your career and become more senior, you're going to be working on not a single client or a single project, but you'll be spread over multiple clients and multiple projects. This gives you a little bit more flexibility to manage that work-life balance. So I guess there's light at the end of the tunnel. It gets a little bit better, but it's not an easy lifestyle, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with return to work and everything over the next, period of time.
I was going to say that it also depends on the company you're at. Because for me personally, I have not had to travel extensively. I've been able to just go into a home office and be there pre-COVID. There have been some colleagues of mine that would be traveling constantly, but some companies, they also have a travel preference on how often you'd like to travel and how flexible you are with that. One thing I've been very appreciative of for my company is that we've got a lot of active moms and dads. And so because our managers and senior managers and partners are already setting those boundaries and saying, hey, I have to go pick up my kids, no more meetings for today. Like, tell me what you need to be done and I will do it. And so they are setting that example. It is a lot more comfortable and easy for people like me to also be able to set those boundaries as well, especially, and then there's really less stigma because they are saying, hey, I'm not going to travel. I will be there and be so charismatic on a Zoom call. So.
All right, and now we're gonna go to something that Tawfik mentioned in the chat, but like the travel burnout from a pre to post-COVID perspective, and just for you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I've actually been working on a task force that Accenture has to how we're responding, and it's fascinating. We've been studying our own people to see how the response is, because a lot of them, like myself, we traveled every week. Sometimes I would travel internationally every single week, and you're talking about 30, 40 hours of commute time over a course of 1 week. And even in those weeks, it's funny how those weeks you still didn't feel burned out, but now with COVID and being at home, a lot more people are feeling burnout. And we're finding that the amount of burnout from this work from home lifestyle is much worse than it ever was with the travel. And that's something that I think people consider, because there's a set of boundaries that was there with the travel that I really enjoyed. And that was very much, they never came to weekends, people left me alone. And you used to be able to, Fridays, a lot of these consulting firms, Fridays were sacred in terms of getting all of your internal stuff done. You get your work done, you have your meetings done with people in the same company as you, as opposed to your client. And you had that Friday time, and then you had your weekend time to do whatever you want. And then in the evenings, like Brandi said, you could work hard in the evenings, Monday through Thursday or whatever days you were there. But for the most part, whenever you finished and you weren't in the office or with your team or with someone else, you were able to set those boundaries a lot easier. It's a lot harder to do that in the COVID and the virtual world, because anyone can call you at any time. It's very, you don't have I'm in a room here. Everyone knows where I am. Nobody can be like, oh, you're on a plane. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't call you. Like, one of the nicest parts about long flights and international trips is that you had an extended period of time where no one can call you, no one can contact you, and you can always use the excuse that the internet doesn't work. So basically you had complete time to be able to catch up with your books and movies and whatever else you wanted to do, because you had that break. So I would emphasize people, there is challenges of the travel lifestyle, but everything has its pros and cons. And it's actually fascinating that it's now, and I'm sure other consulting firms are feeling the same, we actually have more burnout now than we ever did, even when people were traveling every week, just because of and I would say it's a lack of that variety. You're behind your laptop, and I'm sure a lot of you who are students now are feeling the same. You're behind your laptop, you're a call after call after call. And it's just a different kind of lifestyle where whenever you were traveling, you go out for dinner with your team, you'd have some breaks in your routine. So even if it was a long day, you had these natural splits. But I don't know if any of you have seen similar experiences for you.
I mean, one thing I do want to call out is that we have a large cloud of existential dread that has not existed before, that is just hovering above all of us. So I think you're right in terms of like our individual actions and how we feel as we are working, but there's also like a bigger environmental thing going on where we're seeing in the news that people are dying every day. It's hard to be able to move forward as if things are still normal when on a greater level, we have loved ones that we've lost. We have things that are so different. Our everyday lives and mechanisms, that coping mechanisms are kind of stripped away as well. And so that also plays a large part in the burnout. Sorry for the doom and gloom.
Reality, right?
All right. So now we're going to kind of wrap up the discussion a little bit here. So if there are two key takeaways that you would want there to be from this discussion, what would they be?
I only have one right now, so I'll mention my one, and then if I think of another one, I'll come back to it. My one is that, consulting, again, I had a great experience. I would mostly recommend it to anyone that has a reason for wanting to do it. I think it's like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to get into consulting, one was to get, like I said, a broader appreciation of different operation context, but also I wanted to join a global firm and go abroad. I studied abroad while I was at Rice, and I wanted to work abroad. So having that opportunity was amazing. Me and my husband went to Chile. We have friends down there. We explored Latin America while we were down there. So it was awesome, and I really appreciate my former employer for giving me that opportunity. So I would say, think about what you want to get out of consulting, and you might be in it for a year or 10 years or 30 years. But think about what you want to get out of it, because I think people will be more than happy to type of give you projects or give you work. But if that's not aligned with what you want to learn or what the type of work that you want to do, then it's up to you to change course and to set your own path. So that would be my one takeaway.
I would agree. I would just say, it is an altruistic choice. You want to be successful naturally, but the reason that you consult is to make your clients successful. And you don't control that. All you can do is enable their success. And so if you really have to think along those lines and be happy with hey, I couldn't have done this without Tawfik helps. Having that as your compensation or a portion of your compensation is something that you have to have a thirst for. You have to be satisfied with that. And it is very satisfying. It's great. Hey, Tawfik helped me. Here's $100, but I couldn't have done this without him. And he changed my business for the better and the lives of all of my employees. That's meaningful. And I think that this altruism is living for your client's success is a big part of the consulting career. I'm not giving you $100, Tawfik.
I know, that's what I was going to ask about next. I'm like, where's my $100? But no.
I mean, I was going to say Tawfik probably costs more than that per hour. But I think one thing, though, in terms of breaking into the consulting field, as with most prestigious types of jobs, there is a strong internal culture. So really being able to reach out, so this term that y'all have probably heard of, cultural fit, it boils down to, is this person thinking and talking like me? Are they able to speak my language in the way that I would like? There's a lot of that going on. So there, is a need for you to reach out and talk to your friends, talk to your network first, and get a better understanding of how these people talk and act and behave, especially when you're coming in from a different industry. Not to say that it's a club, but there are elements to it.
Yeah, and I'll start with my first. It sounds like we're going to do another round with our second. So we have our first now. This is going to be a second coming up. My first one is going to be around, and I'll leave it with this. Consulting is an opportunity to change the world, and I mean that in the most real sense. There are examples that I can point to. I'll say in my career, I'm sure in everyone else's career here, where we have changed companies, and these companies have then changed our way of life. I was working in Asia at one point on a product. I'm not going to say what it is, but you can kind of figure out a little bit. But it's like, how do you make that go to the hands of everybody who needs it? How do you make sure the product is there? It's like, it's little things that you do and the experiences you have, which will change everyone's interactions. How do they work? How do they, like right now we're doing a lot on the green transition. So how do you transition our energy grid? How do you change the things we're doing? And to Jeffrey's point, it's hard. I mean, honestly, a lot of these companies, you can give them advice, you can tell them what to do. They may not do it. So it's going to be a lot of work. It's a challenge. Some people ask, well, why shouldn't I do consulting? And the real question is, can you handle uncertainty and failure? And I gave a story in a talk not too long ago where I talked about a time of failure. There's been many times in consulting that I've just failed, and I failed. The projects got canceled. Bad things happened. But the flip side is you have to have those to help teach you what you need to know for the successful opportunities. Because not a single one of us here has had success without having some kind of failure at the same exact time. And that's important. But if those are like the main takeaways, and then remember, for those of you who have the experience, you can use it. We always need experts. We always need people who know what they're talking about, because frankly, the four of us on the phone here, none of us are really experts. We all basically have been in consulting most of our careers. So it's the experts on my team. It's the PhD who shows up and can teach about the semiconductor industry. It's the person who actually knows their stuff. We always need them. We always need the person with many years of experience, but it's all about who do you talk to and how do you get in. So if you're going to take something back, I think that, and then we'll probably, I don't know if you've had time to think through your next one, Brandi, but we can go back around the horn.
I was just going to give a shout out to you. I really liked your point around not being experts, but you can leverage your expertise before going into consulting and then consulting to maybe be your own consultant or have your own private consultancy. I think if I could shout out to Matt Cheney, is he still on the call? Anyways, he's on the ARA board, who started his own business as a toxicologist. I think I'm going to get it wrong, but in any case, that can be another way to think about, sort of what you want to do after consulting and pivoting to that. So I'll tie my second takeaway to my first takeaway.
I just had the one takeaway.
So then I guess like one last question, how have you stayed involved through the Rice Alumni Network and the Rice Career Network? And what is your advice on like just maintaining that connection?
Well, I've kind of transitioned my career into different locations and, over years and years. And one way that I maintain my connection, the Rice Annual Fund always seems to know how to find you. So you've always got that connection. But I think the Sally portal and reaching out to the alumni office and talking to them about what I do. I mean, that's how I got invited to participate in this forum this afternoon, because I've expressed interest and the alumni office knows what I've done in my career, and they said, "Hey, would you do this?" And I said, "Absolutely." I am very proud of my association with Rice. I always bring it up, a typical comment that I'll make when I have people say, "Oh, so you went to Cornell? Why couldn't you get into Rice?" It's like I'm always sort of teasing people to tell them, Rice is a very, very valued degree. And I think we've got more tools now to keep in touch than we did when I graduated, that's for sure.
I mean, I'll add this much. I will say consulting has got me to see more Rice alums than probably most that I would have ever seen if I was in one city, because what I've been able to do, frankly, consulting can be a really lonely life if you let it. And this happens to a lot of people. If you're traveling, I remember I was sent out, and the team at the time made it seem like it was going in the middle of nowhere. They sent me out to Taiwan for a few months. And so when I was there, I didn't know anybody who lived in Taipei. And the important thing for me was I actually reached out to of all people who know who everyone is, right? I reached out to the development office at Rice. And I said, do you have a list of alumni who live here in Taipei? And they sent me the list of the alumni within like the couple of years that were close to me. And I actually sent them all, I got their emails. I sent them all an email and invited them to come out, join me this is pre-COVID, join me at the park for a picnic at the park one of these Saturdays. And I had a whole group of alumni show up. And frankly, I wouldn't have, at least in my consulting career, I don't think I would still be in consulting right now if I didn't do things like that, because it can be lonely. I mean, you show up at some city and you're like, I don't know anybody in whatever town or place or whatever it is you are. I mean, you might not be in Taiwan, you might be somewhere in Kansas, who knows where your project is, and you don't know anyone, but being able to find out in your Rice network, somebody might be there, someone might live there, and it just takes like, hey, you're from Rice too, and you can have that conversation and have a friend in whatever town you're in. It's super important. And the flip side is, honestly, it's one of the best ways to connect with people that you would never be able to see. I mean, when was the last time you got to see someone in whatever city? You don't have good excuses to go, but if work's already paying for you to show up in New York, then you hang out with your New York friends. Like that's part of, I'd say that's one of the biggest benefits of consulting.
You sound like you are an OE coordinator, or at the very least an OE advisor. The personality type is very strong within you. One thing that I do, which was pretty normal, which was pretty easy, was I am a Rice alumni volunteer interviewer. So every year I do get emails and I get assigned 10 new high school students that I'll interview. And a neat story out of that was that I interviewed this one girl. She was fantastic. She got into Rice, and then I completely forgot about it. And then 2 years later at a career fair, she recognized me, and then she started applying for Credera as well. So that was an interesting, like, full circle way where I got her into, I was the connecting point for college and also for career for this person. But yeah, that's a really easy way to also to continue to help shape Rice's culture as well.
I'll also mention too, I don't know, Toya brought up a great question around whether we have a consulting club, consulting network at Rice. Certainly enough consultants that we should have one if there's not already one. But I would also say too, I think there's just an opportunity to be really intentional about keeping in contact with your Rice network, whether it's your small cohort of folks, that we were close friends, getting on Zoom calls every so often, or participating in, college events after. Again, we had sort of the new format of homecoming through Out Together this year, which was amazing. Hopefully many of you were able to join that programming. We also have an initiative or part of a task force. I'm on the Association of Rice Alumni Board, and we have a task force around engaging owls. And so understanding the ways that you can keep in contact with the community via the Sally portal or via other networks or departments if you're from the graduate community is really important. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. I'm happy to give resources and how that might be possible. But I just would say that there's so many opportunities to get involved. There's so much programming. There's a virtual wine night that I think that the community from Atlanta is hosting soon. And so there's just really awesome opportunities between, social and academic, from the Public Policy Institute, Baker Institute. So I'd say figure out, however you'd like to be involved, and just, hammer that home and enjoy it. I think there's just so many great ways to get involved at Rice and stay involved at Rice. You just have to choose it.
Right. So with that, I'd like to conclude the panel discussion and hand it over to Alexa.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our panelists and our moderator. Hope we can all applaud everyone from where, we're all zooming in from all these different places. I'd also love to thank all of you for attending today, for joining us